You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking again to Jane Edison Stevenson, who is the vice chairman at Korn Ferry International. She's based in Atlanta, and she wrote a top-selling book called Breaking Away, which was published by McGraw-Hill. The subtitle of the book is How Great Leaders Create Innovation That Drives Sustainable Growth and Why Others Fail. So Jane was on the Goldstein on Gelt show a few months ago. If you didn't hear that, you can download the podcast of that interview at the radio shows tab of www.profile-financial.com. Jane Stevenson, it's a pleasure to have you back.
It's a great pleasure to be back.
Listen, I'd like to talk to you a little more about the title of your book. First off, why Breaking Away?
Well, we can't claim total credit for Breaking Away because McGraw-Hill and we collaborated on that along with our agent. But the reason why we resonated so much with it is because the companies that innovate tend to break away from the pack competitively and take the lead in a significant manner. And we thought that was just very illustrative of what we want to happen for the people who read the book.
Okay, now we'll go to the second half of the title, How Great Leaders Create Innovation That Drives Sustainable Growth. I want to break this up into its components. Do the great leaders create the innovation, or do their staff their teams create the innovation?
We say that innovation is a team sport because it's not possible to create great innovation in isolation. And so I think definitely the answer would be team.
Okay, so in the reprint, we'll say how great leaders and their teams. All right, and the next question is how the great leaders create innovation that drives sustainable growth. So what does it mean to be sustainable?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because in being an investor yourself, you know that to have a great investment strategy, you need a portfolio approach. You don't put everything into the highest risk category, nor do you have everything in bonds that aren't necessarily going to give you the highest return. Innovation is the same. And what we did is to create an innovation framework that we distilled down to 4 types of innovation. We have transformational innovation that is very high growth, but is defined as something that changes the way we live our lives as we know it. And then we have lower risk innovation, that's marketplace innovation, which is really focused on enhancements and things that are innovative but recreating something that already exists.
So an example would be, what would be an example of that?
Well, this is very, very simplistic, but if you think of Ben & Jerry's, the flavor of the month would be a marketplace innovation. Or if you think in terms of a new brand of Tide, where there's a new smell that goes with the detergent or something like that, where you're taking something that exists, but you're putting a brand new innovation with it that makes it fresh and competitive. Category is in between those two, and probably an area where businesses should focus a lot. Category innovation takes your transformational innovation and then creates either new applications or new markets to serve out of that. So it's still risky, not as risky as transformational because at least you know what the product or the service is or the basis behind it. But it creates whole new incremental revenue streams. And then you have operational innovation, which we look at as sort of the faster, cheaper, better of how you're doing what you're doing.
So an example of that would be what?
Supply chain innovation, looking at a new financial algorithm, maybe even just a restructuring of the way the management structure is set up. Anything that's internally focused as opposed to externally focused would be your operational innovation. What's important is that businesses have each of these going on. Operational innovation is something that you'd want having in place 24/7 with any business because you always want to be thinking about how you can innovate and make things new and more effective in the way they're delivered. But you also want to have category innovation that's being developed as well as marketplace innovation to keep it competitive and fresh. And honestly, transformational innovation is what's going to deliver the value for our children and grandchildren. Transformational innovation is the highest risk because it's driven by discovery and invention as opposed to a knowledge of what you have to offer. And it also, by the way, doesn't do very well in a corporate environment. So it tends to be something that you want to incubate or do a joint venture to establish. If you look at the internet, that's a huge transformational innovation in our time. And it took depending which source you believe, research-wise, we found it was 40 to 50 years until it was socially adopted in any way that had commercial value. So you figure that's probably, in today's world, the average CEO tenure is 5 years or less. Mm-hmm. So you figure you've got, maybe as many as 10 CEOs before the commercial value is fully realized. And yet, if you look at just the top 4 internet-driven companies in our economy, it's $20+ billion in market value. So when it comes to fruition, it's huge, but it takes a lot longer. So that's why I think it's so important that you've got a portfolio approach and you have companies who sustain the growth because they have major innovation in the category level. They've got that is going to hit at some point in time, the marketplace innovation that's keeping things fresh and the competitive engine revving, and operational innovation which helps you to do what you're doing and deliver it in the most cost-effective manner.
Okay, we're talking right now to Jane Stevenson, who was on the show before. In fact, if you missed her previous fabulous interview, you can download the podcast at the radio shows tab of www.profile-financial.com. Jane's been talking to us for a few minutes now about the different types of innovation, transformational, category, marketplace, right, and operational.
You got it.
And each of these have sort of a different personality. I would suspect that different types of companies are stronger in one area than in another.
Absolutely, and these are cycles, right? So you couldn't put all of your funds into a transformational innovation because it could be 75 to 100% risk, depending on how transformational it is. That said, what's really important for companies to remember is that they need development in each of these areas to sustain the growth cycle. And not only do they need to be developed uniquely, the leadership characteristics and capabilities as the cultural environment that's required for each is quite different. So you've got an overarch of what's needed to make a great innovation environment in total, but then you need to recognize what skills and capabilities are going to take the type of innovation to its greatest success. And the leader that's phenomenal with transformational innovation is not going to be someone who likes corporate bureaucracy even a little bit and is a bit of a maverick, whereas the operational innovation leader is very conforming in terms of wanting every I to be dotted and every T to be crossed. And between that, you've got your category leader, who tends to be a real engager of folks around new ideas and creative approaches, and the marketplace innovator, who's probably one of your best project management leaders in the company. All of them are important, but they're not necessarily interchangeable. It wouldn't be a good idea to develop a leader by taking a transformational innovator and putting them into an operational innovation role, or vice versa.
I got you. In the last 3 chapters of your book, the titles all start with activating. Activating people is Chapter 8, Activating the Market is Chapter 9, and Activating You is Chapter 10. Does a leader have to be someone who activates people or things?
Absolutely. I think that's an element that defines whether you've got a strong leader or not. And activating isn't just about yourself, right? It's about how you get people to see things differently and create a vision of possibility for your customers, for the people that are inside the company, and frankly, having that strength of character to activate and take risks in your own leadership and in your own capabilities.
If someone wants to become an activator, what should he do in order to develop that personality trait?
I'm not sure that activation is a personality trait. I have to think about that. And you've said it in a different way than perhaps what I've thought about in the past. But I think activation is the ability to see what someone can contribute and to help them see what they can contribute and to believe that if they engage and they participate, that great things will happen. And that's a skill that can be done in a lot of different ways with, frankly, a lot of different personality styles. For some people, it's a quiet leader that's in the background, and for others, it's a very take charge, upfront leader. You can look at different leadership styles, even in our current economy. And Steve Jobs is certainly a very dynamic lead from the front kind of a leader, very very successful innovator. In that, whether you think he's a warm fuzzy leader or not would be very debatable. Probably most people would say not. But what he has done effectively is to help the organization to believe that something was going to be accomplished. That said, you could have a quieter leader. A.G. Lafley was a great innovation leader when he was leading Procter & Gamble. Tended to, not that he wasn't visible, but tended to be a little more of a quiet style and didn't necessarily have to have center stage all the time. So different personalities can work. It's about how do you get people to engage, and I call it playing full out. And the great innovation leaders are people that get all the folks on their team to play full out.
Okay, that sounds fabulous. We have been talking once again to Jane Stevenson. She wrote the book with her co-author Bilal Kafarani called Breaking Away, How Great Leaders Create Innovation That Drives Sustainable Growth and Why Others Fail. She was on the show before, so if you missed the previous interview, you can download the podcast at the radio shows tab of www.profile-financial.com. Jane, in the last few seconds, could you just tell people how they can follow your work?
Absolutely. Sign in on www.breakingawaythebook.com, and you'll see a lot of information about the book. You can order the book through any online bookseller or in the major bookstore, published by McGraw-Hill in April of this year. Okay.
Great. Jane Stevenson, thanks very much again for being with us today. I hope we'll have you back on the show again soon.
Thank you so much, Doug. It was great to be here.
All right, take care.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.